but that is all good. Okay, kia ora tātou, no mai, haere mai. Very warm greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Regina?
For who can't hear me? I'm sorry. Sorry, we'll try that again. Can you give me a thumbs up? Most of you can hear me, can't you?
And now, thank you.
Oh, that was Phil. Wonderful, Phil.
Sorry, I had some settings to change, as you do.
Awesome. Okay. No mai, haere mai. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Very warm greetings for everybody who's joined us today for this wonderful symposium in which we're looking at Pacific food security, supporting diverse and climate resilient local food systems. Ko Regina Scavens aho. I'm Regina Scavens. I'm the Professor of International Development at Massey University, and I'm also the Chair of DevNet, the International Development Studies Association of Aotearoa, New Zealand. We are made up of participants from all of the universities around Aotearoa, as well as we have associate members from 2 Pacific universities, NUS Samoa and USP. And we also have associate members from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade here in Aotearoa, and they also provide financial support to DevNet, through which it's possible that we run today's symposium. So big mihi, big thank you to them for supporting this, and also the Council for International Development, our umbrella group for NGOs. So it's great to be here welcoming you on behalf of all of them. DevNet, what are we about? Well, we attempt to connect academics, students, researchers, policymakers, and practitioners to have active discussions about development-related issues and how they impact on the places and the people that we care about. And we are running a number of other things in addition to things like the symposium. For example, this Thursday afternoon, you're all very welcome to join us for Masters and PhD student presentations, which will be little 5-minute snippets of people's research findings. And there's a bit of a competition going on, so they can win awards for that. And this is the first year that we have participants from several Pacific Island universities participating in that. So we're really looking forward to that event. Next year in December, I think early December, Otago University will be hosting our biennial DevNet conference. So we will be sharing those dates with you so you can mark your calendars. Today, we're blessed to have among our numbers a large number of Pacific delegates as well. So a big malo lele, Pakalofa lahi atu, Nisa Bolavanaka, Talofa lava. Hello, Alberta. It's really great to have people from the far stretches of Oceania joining us and indeed leading the discussions through the keynote presentations today. We're really looking forward to those, and this was an intentional thing that the DevNet Steering Committee wanted to do, have a Pacific-led discussion on a topic which is obviously of critical concern in the region. We want to focus on supporting diverse and climate resilient local food systems today. Just so you're reminded what the format is, we're going to have the 3 keynote presentations, 20 minutes maximum each. They all know that after 15 minutes, a lovely goat sound will play. And then they can continue on until 18 minutes when the goat will start playing again, and then it will play consistently at 20 minutes if necessary. But we know they've got so many great ideas to share because we had a bit of a preliminary get together, and I think you're going to be really inspired. It's not often that we get academics and chefs together in the room to share their expertise on these critical issues of food security and the place of culture in understanding and connecting agriculture, food, human health and well-being, environmental health and well-being, climate change. So great chance for discussions. After the keynotes, there's question and answer session. There is a break. And then we really hope that many of you will join us in the breakout room discussions after that, which is when you get to share your ideas about the key topics we're discussing today. And there's a plenary session at the end where we get the key takeaway points from the breakout room discussions, and our keynotes have final reflections on what they want us to take away from the day as well. So that's the format for things. 2 parts of this are recorded, the keynote presentations and the plenary session at the end, okay? And that's so that those who can't join us will be able to watch those things after the fact. Okay, and I wanted to also note that this topic is a bit one that's very close to some of our hearts, because of the strengths that Pacific countries have had in the areas of food security in the past that we would like to see revitalised for the future. And our MC for today, Dr. Apisalomu Mavono, who I'm about to hand over to, he and I have for the last 3.5, 4 years been doing research on what was happening during the pandemic in the Pacific, how people were coping and adapting and showing resilience in the face of the challenges. And we got some really interesting quotes from some of those participants, some real strengths-based quotes that I want us to think about as we go into today, because this is not just about, we are going to be faced with some harsh facts in some of the presentations about some of the issues for the health and well-being of Pacific peoples currently. But we've also got to remember that embedded in their traditions and cultures and their environments are a lot of the answers to the very issues that are people are struggling with. So, for example, in 2021, a female small business owner from Fiji said to us, "People are now becoming self-reliant in terms of food again. This is good. It brings us to depend on the land, to care for it and be sustained by it. It's important for my people to be one and within their land again." Another guy from Vanuatu said to us, "The pandemic pushed us to go plenty, to work hard in our gardens and improved our daily exercise and puts healthier food on the table rather than the processed food from the shops." And according to one Samoan elder, encouraging the diversification of livelihood skills, collective abilities, and cooperation of community members has created an abundance of food for our community. So this might have been in response to a specific shock that hit the Pacific, but some of those answers are clearly there to the issues that are being faced and how we can provide a form of support that can grow more resilience and food security is a key question, I guess. So I'm very delighted to hand over to Dr. Api Mavono. He is appropriately coming to us today from the Garden Island of Fiji, from Taveuni, where there is an abundance of food production, fruits and vegetables. However, while fresh produce might be abundant, internet connectivity is not always so abundant in Taveuni. So if he has to drop out today, he's our CEO, I'm the 2IC. You might get stuck with me again if something goes wrong with his connection, but I'm hoping that's not the case. And can we please have a warm welcome for Dr. Api Mavono.
Vinaka Professor Regina Scavens and Buluvinaka, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2023 DevNet Symposium. My task really is one that gives me much pleasure, and that is to introduce our keynote speakers for today. Seeing from the positive uptake, registration, and attendance in today's session, we can tell that our 3 speakers have a lot of social capital and a lot of popular power behind them. We are all keen to learn more from our speakers, and it is now my task to introduce them to us today. We'll begin with my good friend Vili. Dr. Vili is the Associate Director of the Victoria Drought Resilience Adoption and Innovation Hub. and he is also a senior research fellow at the University of Melbourne. He has conducted research and published widely on food systems, agriculture, food security, health, climate change, and disaster resilience in the Pacific Islands. Willie is currently doing research on evaluating the impacts of agroecological interventions on diets and health in Fiji, the Philippines, and 2 Caribbean countries. He is also the deputy leader of the Sustainable Agriculture Intensification Research in Samoa and Tonga, and he is a member of many regional and global research and development networks. While he has spent many years in Fiji, he is a proud Samoan and a citizen of Tuvalu. Our second speaker today is none other than Professor Tuiloma Susana Taua'a. She is a geographer and educator for more than 30 years, and she has been a Matai for 28 years, a smallholder farmer for 10 years. She enjoys the outdoors, bird watching, and family fa'alavelave. Susana is a keen and active researcher in areas including, but not limited to, gender and climate change, rural development and resource management in Samoa, climate change and health in Samoa, informal sector and urbanization, spatial extent and intensity of socioeconomic change in Samoa. Ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker, and as Regina said, this is quite an exciting time for us because it sounds like one of those funny jokes where you get academics and chefs in the same room. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we have our very own South Pacific superstar, our good friend, Mr. Leonard Vusilai, who is a young chef hailing from the beautiful islands of Vanuatu. He plays an active role within the regenerative agri-tourism movement with the non-for-profit organization Regenerative Vanua. He has also earned recognition as an award winner in the Pacific Island Food Revolution competition. His fervor lies in crafting menus utilizing locally sourced ingredients, as he firmly believes this approach can provide vital economic support to local farmers and celebrate the unique culinary traditions of Vanuatu. In his capacity as a technical advisor for the Local Cuisine Revival Initiative under the Agri-Tourism Program, he strives to promote local cuisine and instill pride in the region's indigenous foods. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as we welcome our 3 speakers, keynote speakers for today's program. Before we move forward, I'd like to just put forth a number of important reminders. First, a quick reminder to you, our speakers, your time limits of which you are familiar. Our 2IC, Professor Regina, will play a goat noise briefly at 15 minutes and again at 18 minutes, then it will play continuously at 20 minutes until you complete your deliberations. For the audience, I would like to warmly encourage you to put questions to our speakers in the chat provided as you go, as we'll do all questions at the end of the 3 keynotes. If others like questions, they should like it, as those questions will be put to the keynotes first. And lastly, before we hand over the mic and the floor to our speakers, I'd like to share with us a Fijian proverb, which has a lot to do about today's deliberations and our discussions. In Fijian, the proverb goes, Mateo valendua, mbulo valerua, which essentially means it's better to maintain 2 gardens as opposed to 1. There must always be a backup plan. And the wisdom of our elders have taught us that in everything, whether it's in food production or in surviving catastrophes such as cyclones and droughts, it's always useful to have a backup plan, a contingency to be able to adapt and to face the uncertainties that befall us. So now I will give the floor and welcome our first keynote speaker, Dr. Viliamu Nakabakaleu, sir. The floor is yours.
Talo falava and Pulo Vinaka, and thank you very much, my brother and Chair Api, for laying down the war dance to set us up this morning. Can you hear me? Before I press my timer, I also have a timer here. I don't like the sound of the coat. It makes me hungry because there's very good cold curry in Fiji. Okay, so that's good. You can hear me. So now let's go. Let's share my. Can you see the presentation?
Perfect.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Prof. Okay, so what I'm going to speak about this morning, the title, I'm not hungry, but I'm food insecure. It's a very common response we hear from the community when we speak about food insecurity and food security. That's always the question. Why are you talking to us? We're not hungry. And I'm going to talk about the shifting realities of the food systems and the triple burdens that climate change put on our food insecurity status. It's important that when I speak about this, I also speak on behalf of a research group we have, the Pacific Ocean and Climate Crisis Assessment that is happening now. I will talk about that later on. But in the structure of what I'm going to talk about, before we talk on climate change, we all have to understand and appreciate the fact that climate change adds or exacerbates many pre-existing issues. So it's good that in this presentation, I will just outline briefly some of those underlying issues with our food systems before I touch on the climate change, and then we move on the way forward. There is a general perception outside the Pacific, and sometimes it has been romanticized to an extent that people do not believe that non-communicable diseases are happening in the Pacific. There is a perception that the Pacific is still 100% getting its food from the beautiful ocean we have and also from the lovely gardens around our houses. And we are not eating from the shops, we are not purchasing food. But that is not the reality we have. And this system has been shifted a lot to the reality that our food system is no longer a system where the flow of food, it's also a system where we have the flow of cash or flow of money. And sometimes money is the priority more than the food. And the reality as well now, as we see in this diagram, that while expectation of the food system is one that follows traditional local food production, the reality is that the Pacific is heavily reliant on imported foods as well. So in short, there is zero food sovereignty, zero food security at the moment. But what does it really mean? We will talk about that later on. One of the facts as well, we are relying on imported food a lot, as you have seen in the previous slide, but the quality of the food that we are importing have been dropped or like very unhealthy foods for a very long time. And as this graphic shows that it hasn't recovered. So it's not only that we are relying on imported processed foods, but ultra processed foods. And this is the reality as well. And I'm bringing this here for discussion because when we speak of food security in the Pacific, the FAO traditional definition of food security becomes a more of a vision or a goal rather than a definition of its own. And in the Pacific, when we speak, this is from years of experience of working with communities and in research, when we speak of food security, it's often related to a or perceived in a hungry or not hungry status. And then if people are not hungry, they say, I'm okay, I'm food insecure, I don't want to worry about that. And there is, you see the one in red here, this is one of the interesting findings that we have seen, and we have talked about this many years. But some of my colleagues from Europe, Asia, US, and the Caribbean, when we were doing research on this, they look at this, it's quite a little bit different. But this is one of the most important driving powers or driving forces of of our eating habits. It's the status of food or the perception of food that we see. It's framed by our cultural norms, our economic status, the development status, and the spirituality of it. And in the Pacific, we found in our data, you will see some of those papers, that the educated and the high socioeconomic status people are the ones that buy more unhealthy foods. And because they can afford it, because there is a perception that eating at McDonald's, for example, is something that you only can afford when you have a job. So it's like a sign of an achievement. Of achievement is to be able to go and eat at a restaurant. There is a very interesting status in Tuvalu or some of the atoll islands. If you eat rice, you are in a good status because that's the food the colonial masters ate. If you eat a local one, you're poor. In some cultures in the Pacific, if you eat rice, you're lazy. If you eat taro, that means you're hardworking. So these perceptions tend to impact the way we look at things. And the low socioeconomic status ones we saw as well, they are the ones who eat more healthier. They could more consume foods from the garden and a more diversified process as well. And this is one of the realities. Food insecurity in the islands is not about the lack of food. It is about overeating, or it's about diversifying. The lack of that diversity, or the lack of some important nutrients in the diet. So when we speak about food insecurity in the Pacific, it's about the hidden hunger. And about the lack of those important nutrients and the lack of food sovereignty. And this is very, very important for us. And this is the outcome of it, of the shifting of our food system to a more purchased, urbanized kind of systems, is that we top the whole world in terms of obesity, diabetes, and a lot of our health budgets goes to about 75% of the expenditures going to treatment of non-communicable diseases, which is a very reactive position. But I'm not going to, I only have 15 minutes, so I need to argue about those now. But in this figure, it shows that we double, almost triple the global average in a lot of these indicators. And something is not right, as we know that. And I know that I'm talking about climate change today, but it's important to see that climate change is one of the many drivers, but they are all connected. The other drivers feeds, or climate change feeds on the vulnerabilities created by other drivers. And that's really important when we address the resilience of food system, address it in a systemic way, where we look at it not just in the environmental lens, global lens, but also in the development lens and a social lens as well. And this is an interesting diagram because it has been recognized through the IPCC that with the increase of degree Celsius, there's an expectation of an increase of risks. And these risks with agriculture, water resources, forestry, health, for example. And if you look at the diagram there, it seems like it's darker as it goes beyond 1 degree Celsius. In the Pacific Islands, all those darks are already within 1 degree Celsius. As some of our countries are almost 1 degree Celsius or just above 1 degree Celsius average at the moment. And all of those risks climate change has brought are already in 1 degree Celsius, because that's climate change risk plus the many others there. So what does it does Pacific Island, if we look at our food system, based on the traditional ones we talk about, we also have a rural food system where some food are coming from the garden, and then most of those food go to the market and also go to exports, because, as I say, the source of food is also a source of income. But with climate change, it further reduced the local production because of the damages on the crops, dead livestock, and also damages in the fisheries sector. And then when those sources of food and also sources of income are down because of this cascading or hyperactive impacts of these the extreme events from a climatic perspective, climate change perspective, it also reduces the sources of income, as most of the households rely on agriculture and fisheries for food and also for income. But on the other side is that there is an increased cost of food at that very time. And we have seen this in many cases in the Pacific Islands. The cyclone that goes over Fiji, and especially if it goes in Suva or close to Suva, then the guys from the western side of Fiji come to Suva and control the prices of vegetables. And then go shift it to the roof. And we saw that with the increase of the prices of cover after TC winter in 2016 in Fiji. So, and it shifts the system to a more open food system where there is high reliance on purchase. But at that time for the atoll islands, it's worse than it, because at the moment the atoll islands is very much open type of food system. And then there is a high dependency on food aid. And this is, I think it's very important for us to understand. And then how we're responding to this, if you look through all across our adaptations in the Pacific, most of them are really much in the components, which is focused on agriculture adaptation in a system, or just focus on the fisheries, focus on the road. And most of these are incremental. And then we look at all the different types of adaptations that we are doing. And it's really, really sectoral. And this is the sad thing, that how can we address a systemic challenge or a systemic issue using a very highly sectoral approach. And a lot of works are improving soil structure, change of genetics, pest and disease management, water use, irrigation. There is now an increase of home hardening as part of this approach. There's a very good way of doing the AFROMET, as we have seen in Vanuatu, and I think in Samoa and Tonga, in Fiji as well. And there is an increase coming of like food preservation as well. So, but on the right side, the one in Sekol is a reality from about interviewing about 500 farmers and fishers in Vanuatu in Fiji. And after all these adaptations, when things happen, about 80% of those farmers or those fishers use all their savings to trying to respond or recover after all those disasters. And we look at these savings, they are like it's not $1 million saving. They are like $100 or $200. And some of those savings were meant for the school or the food or the health priorities, but they got reshifted in order to help the household survive. And given food is an important priority, so when they shift those small spendings or earnings they have at that time, it shifts all the other priorities from the households. There's almost no money, so they stop their kids going to the school that they plan to go to as well. So they do all the negative coping adaptations as well. So, and most of these impacts are shown by the farmers. And these are some of the projects that we are doing, trying to address this in a bit systemic way, looking at production and also marketing and also the consumption as well. So we have a United Kingdom National Institute of Health Research. It's led by Exeter. It's in partnership with the University of South Pacific and also the NGO friend from Fiji. So these research partner with NGOs and communities. They're all researchers as well, and trying to look at agroecological, to look at improving the health of the soil, the local environment, health of the people, and the health of the ecosystem and the planetary health. We also have the Pacific Ocean Climate Crisis Assessment that is funded by MFAT. It's co-led by the University of Canterbury, our chief, Professor Ratuva, and also the University of South Pacific, Professor Holland, lead this, trying to bring the stories from the Pacific to link it to the climate change space. And the group that you show, you see here, the ones leading food security and climate change chapter. We also have a family farming, lifestyle and health. This is trying to link the two so that it doesn't co-component. This is from agriculture, fisheries, going to the lifestyle. This is like the school system, the movements, and then looking at the dietary diversity. And the University of New Caledonia, National University of Vanuatu, Solomon Island National University, University of South Pacific, and Papua New Guinea universities, and a lot of French universities are partner in that. And we have the ACR one that is led by the University of Melbourne. This is on sheep and taro in Samoa, looking at an integrated system. And for Tonga, it's on the traditional farming traditional yam farming, trying to look at whether this system can increase resilience, increase productivity for farmers, and also increase resilience to climate change. But I just want to land here. I know that it's coming to an end with the 15 minutes and the code. We'll do the mayor really, really soon. I just want to highlight these important camps because they tie back to what we are trying to do. In most of the conversations, we talk about just one component of the system. There are some data at a national level, but at the household, it's all fragmented. It depends on who studies what. We do have nutritional data surveys at the national level, but I think it's one thing we need to look at how to bring these data together or generate the data through research. There's a need to look at the effectiveness of different interventions. We have committed a lot of resources and time trying to address this issue for years. But what have we learned? And this is really important to look at the effectiveness of do this impact evaluation. The third point here is a very interesting one because climate change has been considered as an existential threat. Non-communicable diseases in 2011, the Oakland statement by the PIFs, the Civil Island Farm Secretary leaders, frame non-communicable diseases in a climate change framing. Well, like the language was almost like existential. NCDs are existential in the Pacific. And then in the 2014 Honiara declaration, the NCDs roadmap, it was also very clear. NCDs, as with climate change, are existential threats. And I think the leaders are trying to bring the NCDs, especially the Ministry of Health, to the same level of attention. So it can help to generate resources to look at more preventative measures rather than cutting off the leg at the hospital. And if you look at the Samoa agreement that was just signed with the European Union, there are some really good coverage there. But I want to draw your attention to the Blue Pacific framework, which is the recent endorsed one. There's a lot on climate change in the themes. There are some on food security, but there was almost, I think there was no mention of non-communicable diseases. And that is, I think, we're still looking at it in a very silo approach, but we need to look at it in a much more systemic way because a sick population is a useless population. And you can make your island float. But if you do not have that proper human resource there, then it's not good. We have traditional knowledge adaptation and efficacy that we want to look into. This is testing how climate change impacts TK. And then we look at the nexus of agriculture, climate, and livelihood, shifting of food systems in relocated communities. Oh, now I hear the quotes. Okay, thank you, Prof. Shift of food systems.
Sorry, you've still got 2 minutes, Billy. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. So the shift of food systems in relocated communities, we're starting to see non-communicable diseases coming out of the relocated communities because they run away from the sea, but expose themselves to the purchase market. And then we are working with some of my colleagues, my brother Robson from Vanuatu, and a team from Papua New Guinea to trying to capture weird foods. And it's good that Leo is in this, so we will have a conversation of how to capture these weird foods. Because when Robson talked to me about eating the the shoot of the breadfruit, I was like, that's weird. We don't eat that in Samoa. He say, oh, that's delicious. That's a cyclone food, and also the giant swamp taro in Rewa in Fiji. So we're trying to capture these stories and trying to bring it back to the normal system. And then the last one, the culture, food, and health. So in this one, you see, we can form a team, but who has the money? If you have the money, we have the people here with Professor and all of us in this, we can form teams. And then to conclude this, we did a study looking at a systematic review, and we look at 26,000 different studies. And there was a very interesting finding that we found in this space. And that is like, the evidence suggests that multifaceted approaches are likely to be the most effective, and local food approaches may promote effectiveness through mechanisms of culture, and contextual relevance. And that is really important as we plan to build the resilience. Just look at and trying to understand the local context where you are working, but also look at how those cultural values could become really important principles and foundations of the interventions you're trying to do in order to build the resilience of the food production system, the resilience of the transportation, the storage, and most importantly, the consumption, and also the waste management part of it at the end. So that is the team as I was talking about. There are far more of us in this group, but we can only fit these people in the slide. Yeah, so really appreciate this opportunity. I'm looking forward to the discussion later. These are some of the papers that have been generated in the last 3 years, 4 years, if there is any interest. Thank you very much.
Vinakawakaleu, my brother, Dr. Willie, and congratulations to you and your team for the groundbreaking and absolutely necessary and impactful work that you're doing at the moment. Now I'll invite our second speaker, Professor Susanna, to prepare to take the floor. We will take all questions, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of our 3 keynotes. Over to you, Susanna. Vinakawakaleu, Professor.
Organizing Committee of DevNet 23 Virtual Symposium. Our esteemed participants, a very warm virtual talofa from myself and my colleagues here at Lepapa Ngalangala. I'm deeply honored for the invitation to speak on a very important and topical matter of great concern to our people. I'd like to share with you some of the food security challenges related to smallholder farming that are shaped afresh by new context as we approach the closing years of the Sustainable Development Goals. I speak from the perspective and experience of a smallholder farmer, informed by historical, theoretical, systematic, and popular opinion of the challenges, both immediate and long-term, that smallholder farmers encounter in providing for their food needs. I will also touch on what we're doing and what we believe should be the way forward. I've noted some important issues that I hope to cover in my 15 minutes of fame. And if I can't, then I put it to the audience, the participants for Talanoa. Hopefully after our Talanoa, I hope to come away with some solutions to reduce our food imports by 30%, because currently it stands at 80+%. Slide 3.
Excuse me, Susanna, I'm sorry, but the slides aren't moving for us. We still see your first slide.
Oh.
If we need to, Fong could share. Now it's moved. Yes, now it's moving. Thank you.
Yeah. Now we're on to slide 3, Professor.
Papatai lava, all good.
Now, the fundamental challenge that is important to provide context to farming is the land issue, such as the natural factors like the land capability, the country's geology, soils, elevation, slope of the land. Some excellent data on geology and soils from studies conducted by Kia and Wood in 1959 and by Wright in 1963 have been incorporated into some more recent land resources planning studies to produce maps like the one on this PowerPoint. And that shows the land capability in terms of the potential value for agriculture and other land uses. As you can see, land class 1 is generally flat gently sloping lands with very few limitations to agricultural use. And that makes up only 14% of the country's total area. The soil nutrient levels vary, but the relative absence of stones at the surface and fewer periods of moisture deficit in most areas make it relatively easy to cultivate and manage. Land class 2 includes some imperfectly drained flat land, hilly country with 50% or more of the surface covered with stones or boulders. Fertility varies from medium to high in terms of natural nutrient levels. Most places can expect periods of moisture deficit, less than 30 days. Now in Northwest Upolu and Western Savai'i, the periods of moisture deficit may be longer, with some major impact on agricultural production in those parts of the country. The combined area of class 1 and 2 makes up 56% of Samoa's most usable land. Now, these are the areas that attracted European settlers, Germans in particular, in the 19th century, who were seeking places to set up plantations. Now, land class 3 and 4 presents severe to unsuitable conditions for agriculture. These are the upland bogs, coastal swamps. Soils contain more than 50% of stones and boulders, lava sheets on the surface, moderate to severe erosion on the steeper slopes, and at higher altitudes, very high rainfall, soils are strongly leached. These areas are best suited to watershed protection or other conservation purposes. Now, many smallholders across the rural areas of Upolu and Savai'i are planting forest trees, and that's a way to manage these parts of the country. So as evidence from the map presented, there is an uneven distribution of usable land across the country. Most of class 1 and 2 have been cleared for settlement and other forms of non-farm activity. Former Westec lands that were under the Western Samoa Trust Estate Corporation are now managed by the Samoa Land Corporation. Now, most of these lands have been subdivided. These are the good agricultural lands, subdivided into quarter acres, half acres, etc., and sold to allow Samoans access to freehold land. And these would be the areas around Lele, Vaitele, Nu'u, Falelauniu, and Alesa. And that correlates with a steady rise in households farming on freehold land from 3% in 1989 to 16% in 2019. There's also a notable decrease in households farming on customary land from 94% in 1989 to less than 79% in 2019. That's according to the latest Samoa Agricultural Census Survey conducted in 2019. Now, aside from that, the bulk of customary land remains forested and lie at higher elevations that is less suited for food crops other than other plantations around Whangaloa and Safune, or they are best left for forest conservation and watershed protection. Now, the land capability factor provides an explanation for much of the uncultivated, unused, under usage of land. The most practical and sustainable approach is agroforestry, and there's a growing number of smallholders exploring agroforestry and multiple cropping as part of several UN-funded projects since 2011. Having said that, many smallholders farm on less than 2 acres of land on a semi-subsistence basis. It's a way of life that is changing since the early years of migration and remittance in the 70s and 80s, and more so now with New Zealand's recognized seasonal employer scheme and Australia's PALM scheme. We may be filling the unskilled low-skilled labor shortages in New Zealand and Australia, but that's fine because seasonal work has proven to be an impactful intervention to curb hardship and low income among many rural farming households. Farming is a risky and difficult way of making a living. A part-time farmer like myself, I do not rely on farming for my livelihood. If I hadn't received this promotion, I would have registered as a strawberry or kiwi fruit harvester. Now, many small farmers are excluded from productivity enhancing financial services such as loans. So they're unable to secure capital. But seasonal work provides both an opportunity to address a mix of interrelated social economic risks and challenges. It's a household decision to send one able-bodied person of the household to work overseas, to acquire the initial capital to address the many challenges that I highlighted earlier in a second slide. So it makes economic sense, given many rural families are also deprived of people, a state of ausange ainga. That's reflected in reduced household size and increased dependency population ratio. If you superimpose other challenges, such as the limited access to infrastructure, markets, and cheap and relevant technologies and farming knowledge, and of course, increasing vulnerability to climate change, health risks, financial risks, and many other challenges, seasonal work is a practical and realistic approach. Now, the size of smallholder farms is a challenge in itself. Small describes the family-based farm production. That's beautiful, bountiful, efficient to operate in the last 30 or 40 years or so. But it's not so beautiful anymore in Samoa because many smallholders farming on 1 to 2 acres, medium-sized 2 acres to 10 acres, are struggling with labor challenges, the low labor productivity, the Samoan quota scheme, the high dependency population, it's 81% in rural areas, the reduced size of households, climate variability, increased cost of weed killers and pesticides, the lack of proper tools, planting materials, weak commitment from the relevant ministries. Can you go to slide 4? And land issues, such as one related to the leasing of customary lands. It can be, slide 4. Yeah. So the process here of leasing customary lands can be very long and complicated process. As shown on this slide, there are 7 steps. So by the time you get to step 3, you're probably dead or you've forgotten what you're applying for. So this is displayed in a very public space at the Tate building, and it's all in Samoan. So I suppose you can zoom in and translate. Okay, so slide 5.
Sorry, Susanna, we still aren't seeing the slides move. We're still seeing the map on slide 3. Yeah, that's the new one.
Can you see that one? Slide 4.
4 now.
Yeah, after the map.
Yes.
So that's just demonstrating one of the challenges related to land, particularly leasing customary land. And there's 7 steps there. So it's quite a long and complicated process, very time consuming. So, you know, sometimes people actually die while they're trying to lease land. Yeah, so move on to slide 5. Essentially, I think in order for farmers to be food secure, some things need to change. A change of mindset that begins with the farmers themselves. And we are noticing this change for the better among returning seasonal workers with a changed mindset, having acquired new skills, new perspective, knowledge and inspiration to improve on their livelihoods, a renewed enthusiasm for farming with better tools and knowledge. And we are also learning and very encouraged by the Samoa China Agricultural Technical Aid Project, now into its 6th phase. This is a good example of a hands-on approach targeting smallholders and commercial farmers with innovative farming ideas, improving some of our traditional knowledge, training of individuals, farmer groups, women and youth, the very ones who can bring the energy and innovation into the agricultural labor force, our women and our young people. Now, this project has trained more than 10,000 farmers, provided planting materials, new varieties of vegetables and fruit trees, tunnel houses, for example. So the project has demonstrated potential to rejuvenate farming in Samoa. Now, if this is a glimpse into what the Belt and Road Initiative brings, I think we eagerly await for what is to come post-2030. Now, the role of farmer organizations is important to focus development activities that are donor funded for transparency, accountability, monitoring and evaluation. There needs to be more farmer organizations. An example, the ornamental farmer groups working with the Pacific Horticultural and Agricultural Market Access Program that's funded by DFAT Australia to develop floriculture crops, orchids and other ornamentals for the local markets and hopefully for export. And then we have our 1 million district development program.
Sorry, that's the 5-minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm almost done. And I'm on to the 1 million district development program. I believe if that is properly administered and implemented, it has the potential to improve our food systems. Slide 6. So slide 6 and slide 7 and 8 are images of my small farm. Can you see that? So if you need...
No, not yet, sorry. We're looking forward to it.
Okay, 6 and 7, Professor, those are images of my small farm. So if you need to buy some cassava, please email me or contact Professor Regina and Fong. If you know any importer among our Samoan community, pass on a good word for me. My colleague and friend Billy in Melbourne, I know there are a lot of cassava tallow eaters there. So maybe that's the only way you can help boost food security is healthy exports. Thank you for listening.
Paftai lava for that. Professor Susanna is up. He's still with us. He's been messaging me that his internet is dropping in and out all the time. So if you're there, please start talking up. Otherwise, I'll just thank warmly Professor Susanna again. It's so interesting to have someone who's practicing small farming as well as is in the position of being a professor teaching the next generation about issues around food security, climate change, traditional methods of food production, but understanding the realities of things like the need for capital to invest in your farms. And that's why sometimes overseas seasonal employment is seen as so attractive. So look, really great. And thank you. Some questions have already been coming through, which is great. And in terms of that, sorry, there's a little bit of chatter in the background somewhere. If you could please mute your mics if you're not needing to have them on at the moment. Thank you. Sorry, and I just got distracted. Some great questions coming through already. Dr. Villi has been answering some as they go, but there will be a chance for you to ask some at the end of the three presentations as well. But let's, with no further ado, move on to our wonderful Chef Leo coming to us from Vanuatu, who's going to give us another perspective on these issues, bringing culture front and center into the discussion. So very warm welcome to Chef Leo.
Hello, Olgita. Good day, good afternoon on the other side. Before I continue, I would like to acknowledge the indigenous people of our vast Oceania and the ancestors who have traversed this path before us, carried the traditions before us, on which I stand today to make this a short presentation to us all. And we also recognize the continuing struggle brought about by climate change to our island states who are deeply affected, and also not forgetting the families, the Vanuas, who are impacted by land alienation. Now, I will be talking mainly about decolonization of our food systems in the Pacific. I will be mainly using the term Vanua. Why Vanua? Vanua is a common term in the Pacific that is common to most. Sorry, wait, can a little bit of help me? Let's close up this. Sorry, one sec, Regina. Let's close up this. So why Vanua? Vanua, in a term that's almost similar across the Oceania, but most importantly in my language, it simply means my land and all the life within, from the ocean to the land and in the air on which mankind thrives. And so I use a lot of this term, the team under the Regenerative Vanua, we use this term mainly to refer to the communities or the islands that we work with. So people easily connect to the discussions that we bring about into the communities. Now, to the main topic, which is decolonizing food in the Pacific, or feeding stomachs, hearts, and minds, and what does it mean? I would like to clarify the term with decolonization, because when we use the term in our communities, there is some sort of it's also met with some resistance, because we have a mixed or diverse community group. And so decolonization for many, it refers to the process of which or the process of which you take back from the colonial powers. But in the context of Regenerative Vanua, under which I work with the team, that decolonization refers to taking back the way food is grown and prepared, or restoring pride in the Kai Vanua, or our local food culture, and shifting mindsets to regenerative and resilient traditional food and farming systems in our individual Vanuas or Pacifica. This is the reality of what is happening today in our most of the societies, especially in Vanuatu, that I've come across and I've seen since growing up until today. You see the reality of indigenous people or locals within the community apologizing for their own food culture. I've worked with tourism bungalow operators. I've worked with community members, hospitals and schools, and even in the community, in individuals' homes, when the visitors come in. When our visitors come in, they will always apologize for serving a traditional dish or a local food from the garden. And it is something that for me, as a local chef and a food entrepreneur ambassador, I am most shameful of, is because of our own people. And I'm sure it is common in the other regions of the Pacific or the Oceania as well. I'm most ashamed of is people apologizing for their own identity. Our story is not being told right. And so we've become that victim of that mindset that our food is not good enough. And so you see a lot of people, for most of the clients that I've worked with in the bungalows and rural tourism operators, that mindset that a visitor must have bread and coffee on the table is the exact menu to go, which in reality, if we look back into our culture, we had those different traditional dishes for breakfast, and they have purposes. And the food for purpose has been lost in time, mainly due to that what we refer to as the colonized mindsets, where we think that our food is not good enough. And so we have to bring in the imported products so that visitors can enjoy that. And so in time, the stories are being lost. For me, mainly the more common belief that I travel around with working is that every developments and infrastructure happen for an individual to have access to a good quality food. Because at the end of the day, the plate is what matters. The plate is what makes your tomorrow look like or shapes your future. And so if the issue of the content of the plate is not right, then people will still not be able to address the issues around land management, food security, health, nutrition, and all that. And it is a common practice here in Vanuatu. I guess in the other Pacific Island countries, it might be similar, where respect around food is so big that the portion size traditionally used to be relevant, but in these modern times where technology has is playing a huge impact in our lives, where it's making lives a whole lot easier, the traditions are still intact and haven't changed. And so you see the portion size of the food in our culture with respect to each individuals, it's always big. As I always say, and it's a funny saying, there is no small tummy in the Oceania. When you go around in each plate, it has to be from the serving that you get in the community. It's always from the other rim of the plate to the other side. It's not because they just want to serve you. It's the respect around food and the traditions that they always have to give you, so that you do not see the space of poverty, or so that respect is always given, and so that they make sure that you have enough food within the community. So these traditions are sort of translated into the modern food or imported food that we bring in, and the size hasn't changed. For instance, for some of the family members that I've visited, or some that I've had a talk with, a kilo of rice can be consumed by 1 or 2 persons, and for them it's okay. And in reality, it's that purpose, the why, that's important. That is the missing link within the mindsets of a lot of the Pacific people, mainly in Vanuatu. It is something that I work towards making sure that people understand the difference. And so, as you can see in the picture that I've put up there in the PowerPoint, most of the people have sort of transitioned from the gardens into the from the traditional farming systems to the monoculture, or even relying on imported products. Also, as Dr. Billy highlighted, most of the farmers these days, they bring the local produces from their gardens, they sell them, and then they buy the imported products, because they also think that, you know, it elevates their social status in the society as well. If I eat from the supermarket, then I am moving up the ladder of the social status in the society. So perceptions as well are being changed, and so these days traditional knowledge are being lost, and as traditional knowledge around food and farming systems are being lost, histories and identities are being lost as well. And so we see a lot of food insecurities and city crisis happening. These days, there is more amputees at a young age than we have smart individuals or able athletes or smart young community members that are able to help society thrive and build up the society. So not only that, as individuals, most of our programs, our government programs continue to operate in that same manner as well. We talk about change and all that, yet when a disaster happens, the first response is always you see more imported products into the communities, and most of them usually end up seeing the results after 3 to 4 years. You see a lot of when we go back into communities, you find out that there's a lot of amputees or community members who are lost to we've lost due to NCDs or non-communicable diseases. Most of this, what we are fighting against is most of these programs or campaigns that are really strong. And I've been telling a lot of these community members that I've worked with that this has started long before the colonial powers came in. And when the first visitors started arriving in our shores, those mindsets started shifting. Imported products were brought in because most of them didn't really take time to understand and accept the culture or help make the change. So it started from way before that, and then it moved on up. And so today, most of these issues are happening where you see people easily moving into the supermarkets and bringing in local products and selling them and buying rice over using what they grow from their garden, because the colonialism mentality is really strong, and it's something that is common all throughout the islands. Loss of pride in our food culture is the most important thing, and as I've highlighted earlier, almost every community around Vanuatu, and I've heard that personally myself, visiting a lot of the communities, going in as a chef, they would always apologize for serving me traditional dishes. And I would always tell them, never apologize. And they said, no, it's not good enough. Sorry, we've only got this. But I said, look, this is our story. This is our identity. We need to tell the story right. So even visitors who come in from abroad can, understand the story and experience our culture and know who we are through our food. And that makes us Vanuatu. If you are serving all these imported products, then you're not telling the story of our people. So that is the sort of that major issue that lies in our forefront. It's changing those mindsets, and it starts through a plate. And I believe that addressing that plate will make people understand the value of why we are doing this, why we are eating this, why we have to plant this way. And when people start understanding that, then they will be able to address the management of resources within the communities, be able to withstand natural disasters or be resilient in times of disaster. And even if disaster or cyclones hit, we will be resilient and we'll have those food in place, because historically we have these systems in place, but due to this colonialism mentality, most of these families or individuals inside our vanuas have moved from living in the traditional systems within the gardens to supermarkets and all that. And a survey that has been carried out by AUT and IFC, which is the Auckland University of Technology, done for Vanuatu, and the lowest rating was food and beverage. Tourists or visitors that have come into Vanuatu have rated our local our food as the lowest, and I've always been using that in a lot of the communities that I've worked with, or Vanuas that I've worked with, telling them that this is not a reality. Most of these surveys are based on the food, imported food that we live in. Our culture is far more richer than that. And so my we're trying to change the story, because I know for a fact that Vanuatu has a rich traditional food culture that needs the story to be told right, so that people will understand and be able to participate with us and be able to experience or learn about Vanuatu. I'm sure the other Pacific island countries as well, through the cuisine, the story being told right. So as an ambassador to the regenerative Vanua, much of my work is around capacity building and awareness around making people understand the nutritional value or seeing food as medicine, having colorful plates, and making sure that they see the importance of why we eat it, and going back to these traditional regenerative farming systems, which have been with us and have always been resilient in our individual Vanuas. And most importantly is helping locals building the confidence to be able to tell the story of their Vanua, and so that people can participate and easily understand and connect with them at that level. And then personally, as a chef, I've experienced and I've seen the first-hand impressions that bungalow operators have gotten when they started telling their stories and having the confidence on telling their stories. Visitors have really begin to appreciate their services more and left good reviews on their social media platforms and all that, and they've gone back to me acknowledging the work that we did together. And I said, all I tell them was, it's all our work together, and it's more about you telling your own story. It's not me telling the story on your behalf, but making sure that you tell your story right in a way that people will understand and connect with you. And so when they spend money or they bring in economy into the local community, it's bringing value into your community and improving livelihoods through healthy regenerative practices that you bring about or offer in your establishments. So now we're using regenerative agri-tourism, food tourism program under the Regenerative Vanua as a mechanism to build pride in our food culture, traditional food systems, and bringing the value that our Vanua should have for each individual traditional farming systems within their respective context, and be able to tell their story more and be proud of what they have, what the Vanua can offer from the land, the ocean, and the surrounding environment. So basically, tourism is not our primary, tourism is not your primary business, but agriculture or your farming systems or your livelihood is far more important, and tourism ties in as this spin-off to bring in more income. So all in all, Vanua comes first. And now the approach regenerative Vanua is taking is gaining global attention, and we're going to grow our regenerative agritourism movement, because we believe that regenerative agritourism, regenerative food and farming systems is the way forward for our Pacific Island nations who are facing a lot of impact of the climate crisis, as well as food security issues and NCD crisis. And so we have this global agritourism symposium next year, June 2024. If anyone is interested, just look up our website and you can connect with us and reserve a space for next year to join us here in Vanuatu. Thank you, Thomas. It's an honor to be part of this symposium with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomas. Chef Leo, that was a really interesting presentation, giving us a really unique perspective and an important one to, because if we don't have that pride in local foods, how can we have healthier peoples, and how can the Vanua be strong? So brilliant stuff. And you've just seen your invitation, everybody, to attend that global forum next year, which is going to be super exciting, around regenerative agritourism, hosted by Vanuatu. Okay, so thank you so much for those who've already posted some questions and comments in the chat. That's been really lively and interesting. Loving it, including a video I haven't had a chance to look at from Isabel in the Solomon Islands, Isabel the Island in the Solomon Islands, of a particular worm that's a delicacy that we all need to try, apparently. Maybe a new tourism experience for someone. Just a little comment on your presentation, Chef Leo, on the marketing aspect of it, because I saw an interesting thing here in Aotearoa. We've got a new government in place. They're repealing some of the plans around the smoke-free legislation that was going to bring in some changes. And there's been a big campaign out to save the corner dairy. We found out that tobacco companies have driven a lot of that campaign to save the corner dairies. And so they're the little corner stores that we have if you're not New Zealanders listening in. And so the marketing and who's got the power of that over our foods is very important. And so I wonder if I'm just going to, because, oh, that was the final stop on the timer. So brilliant timing. Thank you to all of the presenters. I'm going to take one question from each for each of the presenters from what's been in the chat already. And then anyone else who wants to ask a question, please use the icons, the reaction icon to raise your hand to do so. But let's just get things going with a question on marketing that was asked to Chef Leo. And excuse me, I think it was asked by Tupu. Yes. If you want to ask that question out loud, please unmute and ask it yourself. Otherwise, I'll read out what was written. Tupu Ione Cleverly.
Sorry, you can read it out. So,
are you sure? Everyone's going to get sick of my voice.
No, I got a croaky throat because I got COVID.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Tupu. Okay. Tupu notes, is it the economic mindset worldwide that's driving things like the interest in eating mainly Western foods? How do we make aggressive marketing campaigns to get our people to consume our local food? It looks like the taste for local food has been lost over the generations with the convenience and lifestyle practices. Chef Leo.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Madam Tupu. This is a very important question as well, and it's been raised a lot in so many meetings that I've attended or workshops that I've done. Most of the cultural norms and traditional practices in our communities these days monetize it to that level where it's all about the money and it's not about so much about the value anymore of why we're doing this. And so everybody focuses on the money. And with the local cuisine, I've found with my work that I've been doing in the communities, talking about all the money aspects and other social factors is not going to change someone's perception on making the choice of what to eat, but giving her the results of why you should be doing this makes a whole lot difference. Because I have had a lot of family members, or I've even worked with a hospital here where I visited a lot of patients in the hospital beds who are who are victims of poor healthy choices. And so we use that. I use that in my workshops to educate mindsets using the health nutrition results and the farming systems in place, that if we address the plates and we cook it this ways, different ways, the traditional knowledge is there, but be innovative in how we present the traditional cuisine, then we'll be able to change those mindsets so people understand that our food can also look as good as the other powerful cuisines that are being showcased around the world. Our taro, our dalo, or our cassava, or our yams in the Pacific food culture can be as tasty as other cuisines that we see being advertised strongly around the world as well. But the most important thing is giving them the reasons of why we are doing this and how it will benefit the communities. It's what makes the difference. And it makes them rethink their practices that they have been doing, because in the communities, mostly in our islands, in Vanuatu, most are affected by climate change and natural disasters, and they still continue on that same mindset. But giving them the picture of why we're doing this and the results of what's been happening due to those wrong choices will help them change their perception. And I've seen changes done after the workshops we left, and people starting changing diets, and patients in the sick beds admitting to cooks that I've trained that they have never tasted these local dishes so good as they used to been having at home. And I told them our local cuisine can taste as good, even if it's in our individual homes, or in a restaurant, or in anywhere you get access to a plate. Our local cuisine should be as good. And the reason we tell the story behind the plate is what makes the difference. It's important that people understand why we're doing this, so they know the value it brings to our Vanua, our individual families, and overall our nation.
Thank you. It helps to have good chefs then in the islands.
Yes,
that's right. That's why we appreciate the Pacific Food Revolution approach, and which has been able to help promote that too. Sorry, Chef Leo, you were going to say?
Yes, I think one of the most important thing is that I think we, as a chef, I've come to realize that as well, that we have been the missing link between the consumers and the producers of the last years, in which we can help rewrite the story and making sure that our stories of our food are told right, and our foods look elegant in the plate as well. Because as I always say, and I always refer to, it's a common saying here in Vanuatu, is our food is a one-way traffic. The same thing we had back then, the same thing now. But how can we make it look better? How can we make it more tastier and sexy on the plate, so that people acknowledge and want more of it? And that is the missing link, the bridge between the consumer and is chefs and food handlers being empowered to help locals have the confidence to tell the story of our people.
Awesome. Awesome. I think that's a great point. And so it's not just with marketing about changing the minds, as you said in the title of your presentation, need to change the hearts, get that pride back. So thanks so much for that. Dr. Vili, one of the questions asked to you was from Richard Cassidy about linking food security and water security. Richard, did you want to ask that yourself? Otherwise, let's just go ahead. Vili, any response to what we need to understand about water security? And obviously, Professor Susanna's presentation really touched on some issues of water insecurity around Samoa as well. So it's clearly an issue in lots of places, not just in the atolls.
Thanks, Regina. You've covered it well.
Okay. Cheers, Richard. Over to you, Vili.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Richard, for the excellent question. Yes, as I said in the chat, that those two are strongly interlinked at every part of every aspect of food security. There is food security, and I was saying that we cannot achieve food security without water security, because if we're looking at food security as a system, it's really needed at the production level as well. As we know, in the Pacific, when we have too much water.
Oh, sorry.
When we have too much water, we have floods and all those impacts. When we have less water, we have droughts. And then at the household level as well, we can have water, but if it's not in good quality, then it will affect all the utilization parts of food. I think in a water security aspect, it's not only about the availability of water. And we're writing a chapter at the moment looking at this, and we're looking at water as a very precious, very, very precious resource that enables all the other aspects of the system's health and all other parts of the livelihoods. But we're looking at it as a very precious asset, because we don't have enough already. What we do have is very limited, And then, but we really need to look at that availability and improving the accessibility and the sustainability of it. But most importantly, equality.
Sorry.
Most
Sorry, we're
importantly,
getting a lot of feedback from somewhere. Transforming food systems in Solomon Islands maybe needs to mute. Sorry, and Dr. Vili, I'm not sure if you have two screens going, but it might be why we're getting a little bit of feedback as you're talking as well.
Oh no, can you hear me?
It's perfect.
I only have one screen. But sometimes my voice sounds like that. It has an echo. No, but yeah, I was saying that it's an excellent point because often we forget to talk about water when we talk about food security, but they are very, very important aspect as well. So in the Pacific, they all strongly interconnected, as well as I think the vulnerability of one depends on another. So yeah, I agree. Thanks, Richard, for bringing that important point so we can shine the lights on both of them and other issues as well. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Vili. And a question for Professor Susanna from Mike Line about understanding the issue of land leasing a bit more. Mike, did you want to ask that yourself?
Oh, thanks, Regina. Sorry, my video is not working at the moment, but I'll try and sort it out during the break. Thanks, Susanna. I loved your presentation, told from a smallholder perspective. I have had some experience with leasing arrangements between smallholders, and I know what benefits they can bring, both in terms of efficiency and equity. So it was quite disturbing to hear you make a statement about the constraints on that market. And I wasn't sure if it was a constraint on agreements between households or if it was a constraint between a household seeking to lease land and some third party. I think in the chat box you said it was both, but maybe you could just elaborate on that. Thank you.
Okay. If you can just zoom in on slide number 4, that is basically the steps 1 to 7 as displayed in the public area, the foyer of the Tate building. So it's in Samoan. So it is for everyone, for both locals who would like to access customary land to farm. So if we're just looking, if we zoom in on step 1, it's very clear for anyone who is intending to or thinking about leasing customary land. You have to go and consult the pule, which happens to be the sao or the head matai of the family which the land comes under. So it may appear they are very steps 1 to 7, but if you go through the steps, it takes up a lot of time. It's quite a lengthy process and also very costly. Just to answer your question, it is for families, people who intend to lease customary land for most probably for commercial farming. So it's a challenge because, as I said, I tried it myself. And, you know, sometimes you give up halfway through, or even you give up after step 1. The consultation and the asking can take up a lengthy period of time as well. So I think the point I'm trying to make is from a smallholder perspective, perhaps that is one avenue. Make it less hard and difficult. Cut down on step 7, maybe 2.5 steps.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Whawhatai Lava, Professor Susanna, on that one. So, you know, these are some of the real constraints to getting greater food security, so it's important to understand them. And thanks for the question, Mike. remember, just go to the reactions down the bottom if you want to raise your hand and ask a question of one of our speakers. I'm going to go to other ones that were in the chat for now. Phil Brass has asked a question for Chef Leo about whether there's a link between tourism and the loss of local food pride. Do you think that's the problem with the tourism sector itself, not promoting local foods enough?
Yes, I'm sort of typing up the response for that, but thank you for asking. I will respond and then send your response in the chat box. It is indeed a challenge. The link between tourism and the local food pride is that I've worked a number of resorts and restaurants around town, and the environment in which most of these tourism businesses operate, it sort of creates that barrier for which a local chef could bring about his traditional cuisine into their restaurant to be able to tell the story. And also, most of the chefs, for our chefs who have been into culinary school, we are trained using imported ingredients. And so, you know, for our local chef to substitute wheat flour for cassava flour is a challenge, and it requires that confidence that we need to build up over the years, and that environment for him to be able to express his culinary talents. And sadly, in most of these tourism businesses, you hardly see the local cuisine. It's only either showcased one time per week. And I've seen it because I've been part of these hotel occasions where they hold this Melanesian feast or Pacific feast, and you see the chefs hurrying and putting all these setups on the buffet, and then they stand back and watch the tourists to eat. And most of them are ashamed that maybe the tourists wouldn't like it, and they just do it because the management says so. But most of the time, you hardly see these dishes in the local restaurants. And so it's one of the things that have contributed to loss of our pride in our local food culture. And even most of the chefs that I've worked with, some of them worked before me, they worked longer than me. To this day, when we are cooking together, their confidence in, you know, serving that local food into the restaurant is somewhat lacking. The confidence is not there. They're always holding back. And so I have to tell them why we're doing this. I have to train them to see it in a different perspective so that they're proud of it. And when they start telling the story right, they receive feedbacks and they're happy about it. But then again, it comes down to the management of each establishments, the resorts, the hotels as well. Some operate at a chain management system where they have to get approvals from abroad to be able to incorporate a traditional local dish into the cuisine, which is sort of a challenging issue as well. And it's more to do with the government and the policies in which the businesses come into set up, adopt. So it's more than just chefs doing the work, it's also the policies as well, because investors who come in and set up these tourism businesses, they also play a major role in impacting these chefs and food handlers to go that direction as well. And currently in Vanuatu, for me, I'm probably the individual that's currently going at the space, trying to go local and trying to educate young entrepreneurs coming as well to go in that path. But this addiction or the mindset that rice is more better than cassava and taro is still there. So it's as a chef, I'm fighting that mindset as the colonized mindset, as well as trying to empower locals to see the local chefs to see the value in how our local kai can be in the tourism market.
Ananabu, thanks so much, Leo, for that response. It's a really interesting and challenging question. And it reminds me of one of our PhD students, Gabriel, who is a trained chef from Germany. And he's, as part of his PhD research, he did ethnographic research in Fiji, spent a month working in the kitchen of a Fijian resort. and it was very interesting what he learned while working within that resort. One thing that maybe I can do a prize. Yes, I'm going to do a prize. Okay, here you go. Didn't think about this, but Api and I pulled together this book of the wisdom of Pacific knowledge, Whakatoki proverbs from around the Pacific, mana of the Pacific. It's got some beautiful photographs and proverbs in it, including the one that Api opened the session with on you always have two gardens. If one dies, another lives to feed you. Many other beautiful quotes. Right. The question to win a copy of this is when Gabriel was working in that kitchen of the resort, he was able to get access to the procurement list for a month, for an average month at the resort. What was the item of food that the most money was spent on for that resort? Okay, what was the item of food? So you can start putting answers in the chat if you're interested in that, and I'll let you know when someone gets it right. But we have a question from one of our keynotes, so I can't refuse that one. Dr. Villy, what's your question and who's it for?
It's not a question, Prof. It's a couple of points related to the discussion on this. But then I totally agree with Leo, and I think there is no silver bullet in what we are working in, especially looking at the system as it is. But I think there is also a strength in trying to get to the political will, influence the political will and influence the policy, because sometimes it's not that we are relying on imported food. It's the fact that we are relying on ultra processed and poor quality imported foods. And I understand that we're trying to provide those, and they are always cheaper, poor quality ones, to make it accessible to the people. Because I have seen many other places in the world that they rely on imported food, and they are very healthy options as well. So I think it's important to have a look at that, to encourage the local production, bring back the pride in our food, and at the same time educate our people. But I'm always targeting the policymakers, the politicians, and know that as I showed in one of those diagrams, there's a lot of food imports. There's a poor quality of what we import. But at the same time, we are also exporting a lot of food outside. So I think that's one thing of looking at the balance. I know there is an effort trying to look at the household, change the household perception, change the household eating habits. But it's a system that's needed to look at and address them, because no matter how much you try at your household, but if your child go to school, eat the bongos and taste the bongos from the other students, or go to the other gathering, that's what we see. We have good gardens in the Pacific in some of the countries, but when they have a gathering in the cultural gathering, they don't take the vegetables. They take the corned beef and take those things because it has those status, but how to connect that upward. The second part about it is the purpose of why we are producing, what we are producing. We saw there is this narrative that if we increase production of local food, there is an increased consumption of local food. We saw that in COVID-19. It's kind of like true, but also questionable, because there was a huge increase of local production during COVID-19, but they were not produced targeting the food security aspect of things. They were targeting the market because that's a normal response. And we did a research in Fiji and Solomons. There was very high production of local foods, but then the dietary diversity was still declining compared to pre-COVID, because they didn't have the purchase power to buy the tuna, the can of tuna anymore. They didn't have the purchase power to buy the source of protein. So sometimes what they produce in the garden are 20 different varieties of a root crop. And then in a dietary way, in a food group, that's still one food group. And I think that's kind of a challenge for us to look at. How could we shift the mindset from producing for market or producing to consume locally, and whatever fits. And I really respect Leo's work and all of those great the people who do that. I think Chef Oliver and those programs, because it brings back that pride in the food, but also how to cook our own local foods. One important thing, it's a diaspora, because sometimes when we look at the tourists that are coming in, some of them are coming from our own people living in Australia and New Zealand. And when they come in the countries, they have their own expectations of food. They come in and they want to eat KFC and McDonald's. And then they want to eat the food that they eat in those countries they are in. Because I don't know if it's a status, but the people in the villages copy them as well. So I learned that the hard way, because when I went home, I want to eat turkey tails, because it's like it makes me realize I am at home. But then when I was eating turkey tails, I saw my family all ate turkey tails. And then my brother told me, like, we have never eaten turkey tails for a while, but just because you are here, we eat turkey tails. So I learned to stop eating turkey tails at that time, or eating those type of food in front of my family. But it's something for us to think about as well. But I really appreciate this discussion. It's not an easy fix, but it requires a lot of us, as Chef Leo and also Prof. Susanna mentioned. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vili. And yeah, complex issues, no easy answers here, but we did get a correct answer with lots of other interesting ones too around various foods. It was the beef products that was costing the most for the imports at this particular resort in this month that Gabriel looked at the records. By the way, number 2 was bacon. So anyway, that's just for your information. I am going to finish this question and answer part by asking one question that was asked earlier. Again, it was one from Tupu, who asked a question for Professor Susanna on about traditional Indigenous knowledge in Samoa, about how important it was to retain and pass that knowledge on around things like propagation in the face of some of the newer technologies and problems with heavy use of imported chemicals and those types of issues. So how do you see that? You're a smallholder, you're a professor as well as a smallholder farmer, so you don't have heaps of time. So we all know there's a convenience thing that can come into place with eating as well as with farming. So what do you feel about the place of traditional Indigenous knowledge and how that needs to be passed on? Does that have a place in looking for solutions for food security?
May I add on to that a little bit, Regina? I think generally, also just, generally in people in the village with very good knowledge of what, how they grow the local food and the taro and so forth. So, and then they are introduced to new technology and and when new products doesn't work or the grass is changed or the soil changed, they can put it down to they're not familiar with that weed eater that doesn't really kill. And then it's that sort of, and also the planting and just the local knowledge of how they did it very well in those days with very good organic, because that's the word I've been waiting to hear about that. Sorry, just to add on to the to that question. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Professor. Well, as I said in the beginning, farming is a risky business, and traditional knowledge, yes and no, it's both. It's still relevant today, but it was more so in the last 40 years or so, but we need to move forward. As I said before, 50% of the land in Samoa is stony with boulders. That in itself is a challenge for smallholders and commercial farmers, because soil preparation is very important. You have to remove the stones and boulders. that requires the use of machinery, both smallholders, semi-subsistent, subsistent, commercial farmers. We have some traditional knowledge may be relevant in the past, but if we are to move forward and increase productivity, then there are some TKs that need to be preserved and some that they need to be reinvented and improved. For example, Polili is a way of planting taro, where the land is replanted after first and second harvest without resting the soil. So, but there are ways now with organic farming. Yes, we have an NGO that is spearheading organic farming, but it's difficult because when we're trying to meet the standards from overseas for organic farming, and even if to register and legislate, it's a cumbersome process for a lot of those who are into organic farming to speak with. It's very nice to talk about smallholder, as I said, a way of life. I said that it's changing. The changing mindset as well needs to come from the farmers themselves, because in the past, small farmers have been accused of being lazy and not doing enough. But it's more than just it's not an easy form of economic activity. That's why people take up the moment they get selected with the quota. They will get on that plane and leave. That's why a lot of our rural families, they've got 1 or 2 or 3 people. They rather go on seasonal work, because then when you get back, you have seed funding to begin with. And when you have that capacity, then you're able to do all these things. We can go back to a very nice life, countryside, like in Europe with the Italians enjoying your wine out in the countryside. That's all very nice, but there has to be a base and a foundation for families to build on. You can't really tell them, oh, go to the land, work the land, because that's why I have to go and try it myself. As I said, I'm not going to leave the comfort of my job here. Some of our teachers and the professionals have resigned because of poor salaries, and they've taken up fruit picking. As I said, I was also seriously considering this back in 2007 when New Zealand first introduced seasonal work. That was in 2007 after Pacific Games, when I was a mere grade 3 lecturer with a family, with dependents. But because over the years, personal circumstances like taking care of my elderly parents held me back from, otherwise I wouldn't be presenting now. I would have been a 3rd, 4th, 5th time seasonal worker. So even a person in my position was seriously considering. So I don't really blame people. But yes, as I was saying, subsistent, semi-subsistent, it's a nice thing to have, but it has its time. And now we're talking all these challenges, climate change, and also the cost of living off the land. You just ask the commercial farmers. It's only those with the capital who can employ people. I employed a couple of boys for my cassava farming, but then they had to go for 3 years to pick bananas in Australia because I can't pay them the wages that they're earning there, because I only pay them 50 tala a day. That's without taxes. I'm not paying their rupi farm. So now I have to employ, but it's my job here that is funding and subsidizing. So there's a whole new argument surrounding that. So I hope I've answered the question. Sorry, but See, I'm a bit passionate about it.
Tailava, I think you've answered it brilliantly, because you have that first-hand experience of knowing what it's like to try and survive and do well and look after your wider anga or family and whānau, and like you say, you, who's the professor there of geography, now considered that you might need to do seasonal employment overseas as an option, as a better option to earn income. And you have your farm and you have supposedly a really great job, but it's difficult and it's a struggle. So we have to keep these things in mind as we go forward. I just want to acknowledge as well, as we draw this question and answer session to a close, all three of our keynote speakers. Could we give them all another round of applause, please, for really inspiring, insightful talks? And to hearing from each of them. So if I can make sure that they are all here with us. Oh, I can't see Susanna in the room at the moment. Maybe she will appear magically. Someone's just entered the room. We will soon find out. But I'm going to go in the order in which they spoke today. So if we can go to you first, Dr. Vili. Have you got a couple of points you'd like to share to finish off today? You are strictly on a 5-minute timer. My apologies. I know some people.
No, that's great. It's always good to put a time there. Whether I follow it or not, it's another thing. But thanks a lot, Regina. Thanks a lot, everyone. I think there's a couple of key points. It's really useful discussion, and it takes all of us to trying to bring these different solutions, because it's a complex system. But there's a very strong willingness for us to look into in a systemic way. I put on the chat that sometimes when we put a light on an issue, we tend to focus too much on it, and then we tend to drift away from the fundamentals. So I was saying, like, while we are talking about climate resilience, remember that the fundamentals of our vulnerabilities is not just to climate resilience, it's also to non-climatic resilience, because we do have communities that are living throughout a year on food aid, because after the cyclone comes the droughts, comes the floods, and then the volcanic eruption, the eruption, and then it goes back again. And then when we think of the transformation of the system, think in that context as well. There's a development issue at the fundamental level. And the second part, I just want to touch on the impact evaluation again. I know that we have a lot of solutions, but I think it's important to know how much knowledge systems do we have that can actually support some of these interventions we are thinking of. And then most importantly, run the impact evaluation alongside, not just M&E, just run the impact evaluation so we can understand the deeper learning, because it's a complex system. So that it's not just how to improve a project, but how can all these multi-variables shift the system or shift a mindset, and then going a bit longer, because transformational change takes time. But I think most importantly, it takes all of us. So thank you very much for this great opportunity, and looking forward to forming some of our groups and some of our looking for investment so we can do this in action and start actioning this and document those weird foods and taste it. So if you have a good stomach, come. We will work together on this. Thank you very much, Prof, and thank you everyone for the great opportunity.
Thanks, and if I can ask you to unmute, and actually we can hear the applause for Dr. Vili. Special applause for not needing the 5-minute timer at all, even though he was going to ignore it. That's awesome. Awesome for everything you've shared today. Could I please go to Professor Susanna? You come back just in the nick of time to share with us your 1 or 2 points of key points of wisdom you'd like us all to take away at the end of today. And you're muted. Oh, yeah, you're not muted. Great.
Thank you, Professor and Chair. Well, I think my friend Billy has said it all, but I'd like to go away comfortable and confident that we can enable change. Someone out there needs to create the enabling environment, the political will amongst the island governments. Good governance is also important when it comes to implementing aid, other people's money. There has to be responsible investment. It's very nice to talk about all this. We'd like to have this and we'd like to see it happen. But there are, like what Billy is saying, there has to be that will there, the political will, the people's will, and then of course the resources to be able to drive this change. And what else? And I'm all for seasonal work. You know, there's a two-way impact. But before we even went to pick the fruits in Australia and New Zealand, we've always had that challenge, the low productivity of labor here because of numerous other challenges. But that is a light, the end of the tunnel for us. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing families being transformed, this change we're talking about. So I think having said that, I think we've said enough. So thank you very much, Professor. Thank you to all the members. It's been a very rich interaction. So yes, Whaftai Lava, thank you for all your thoughts and ideas. I know we're all passionate about, you know, improving food security. And I want to thank the donors, our good friends, Australia, New Zealand. Thank you very much, because without you, we can't really, you know, do this. So, Whaftai Lava, from all of us here at Le Papai Ngala Ngala, Whaftai, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Whaftai Lava, Professor Susanna, and a big round of applause for all of what you've shared today. We've really appreciated it. Awesome. Okay, so as is appropriate, we're handing over to Chef Leo to finish off with his words of inspiration. What we should really be finishing off, though, is with a little bit of a feast of local foods. If we were all meeting kanohi ki te kanohi face to face, that's what we would be doing at this minute. And we would need our friend from Isabel and Solomon Islands to bring along some of those worms he was talking about and many other great treats that we could surely try too. So, Leo, what would you like to share with us?
Yes, before I finish off, I want to thank each individual who have contributed to the much needed discussion, the rich discussion today. As a young fella, I'm honored to be sitting alongside you all, my seniors, my elders, to be able to be part of this discussion. While we see and acknowledge the present climate crisis, as well as the nutritional or NCD crisis that's happening, I believe the power lies with the people, and the change starts with the people. And so if we are looking at policies to make the change, policies that should be about us and not for us. And the developments that come in, the aids, the projects that we bring into the communities, it should be about the people and their story and how we can make the change that will be beneficial for their livelihood, and not so much dumb down on them that in a way causes more havoc than development. So as we all say, here in Vanuatu, we are standing on the back of the turtle, yet we are still looking. And this mindset we need to bring forth to empower the people of the Oceania to realize the value which the indigenous knowledge and systems that they have in place, so that we can bring the change that we have always had and we've sort of drifted away from, so we can heal and regenerate our Vanua. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you too much, Chef Leo. Fantastic inspiration, and we're all going to go away with a much clearer idea about what decolonizing local foods means, and really reinstilling the status of local foods and that pride in those foods. So yeah, really awesome. Thank you so much. I have a whakatauki, a Māori proverb I'd like to share with you. Meanwhile, Fong would like to share with you the DevNet Symposium feedback poll. So please do that before you tune out as well. But this whakatauki is asking us to seek knowledge for the sake of our well-being. Whaia te matauranga he oranga mō koutou. So again, seek knowledge for the sake of your well-being. I think this is central to what we've talked about today. Thinking about Pacific food security as something that's more than just about filling tummies, as we've been told, but about pride in local foods, about healthy food systems, about control, food sovereignty, about being able to adapt and change and be resilient in the face of increasing threats, and about drawing from external knowledge, but basing a lot of the way forward on what is already known and the strengths of what is known and what is practiced within Pacific societies, or has been practiced originally as well. So again, very, very much thanks to every participant today. It's been wonderful having you here, including the Mindanao Young Leaders participants who joined us and brought in some other perspectives, and every person here from around Aotearoa, up and down the motu, from around Oceania and further afield. And let's continue these conversations and see if we can together come up with some solutions. Take care, everybody. Go well, and thanks again for participating today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Prof.
So much.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Food secure
Thank you,
ourselves
everyone.
now.
Thank you.
Yes.
Get some nice food.
Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, everybody.
Yay! Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays.
New Year.
Thank you, Ivor.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Regina.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.